Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Life Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Smith. And if you have not done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast. And if you love this podcast and want some more tips and tricks on how to improve yourself, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are a ton of instructional videos there. You can find the links down below. But for today, my friends, that are on this planet made of rock. Well, there's a bunch of other stuff and a bunch of other material, but why is it important that it's made of rock? Why is it important for today's podcast? Why am I extending this introduction longer than it really needs to be? Well, it's because I have my friend Dave Nisbet, and Dave here is first strong as fuck. And what do I mean by strong as fuck? Well, he just posted in his Instagram yesterday. What's the name of that stone that you were lifting? The 380 pounder?
It's called the Agale stone. It's Gaelic.
The Agale stone. So he's really strong. And the reason why I wanted to bring him on is not just because of the sheer strength of what he is capable of, but I think that there is a philosophy in stone lifting that I do not yet fully understand, but I see the overlap between just developing the self and lifting stones and the simplicity of it, the beauty of it. People talk about holistic a lot, where it's as close to natural as possible. And I think lifting stones is one of the, I only did it like once last week, but I would say that lifting stones is definitely a way of really understanding the self. So I wanted to bring Dave on here, mostly to just surprise him and say that we're probably going to talk more about philosophy than and most things, but it all comes from stones. So Dave, my man, I am super pumped for you to be here and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kyle. Looking forward to this.
That's freaking sweet, dude. So I think one of the main question that most people would be kind of thinking of is, what is stone lifting? Can you define stone lifting? What do people think?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends the context you want to put it in. Stone lifting can be a lot of things depending where in the world you are. I'll talk about here. Stone lifting is just a really good way to exercise, to push your mind, to push your body. It's an extraordinarily hard challenge, and a lot of people just click with it instantly. But a lot of people here think that it's rather strange. Historically speaking, though, it's everywhere. Let's be honest, there haven't been barbells and dumbbells until I believe the late 1800s. I don't remember the exact year. And so how did people test their strength? Well, they picked up a heavy object, whether that was a log or a stone. All over the world, Scotland, Iceland, Sweden, China, Japan, Scandinavia, there's all sorts of countries that there's more and more research coming out that this has been everywhere. It's been written about, it's been documented, it's been used for everything from seeing if teenagers could train with weapons to seeing how much money you get paid. It was used as a job interview. So it's actually ingrained in the human condition. It's everywhere. It's been around for thousands of years, and it's just kind of a part of the human condition. And it's a pretty cool thing.
I think that I definitely agree. It's a very cool thing. And there was something with the very first time lifting where, well, one, I lifted a really freaking heavy stone, and I did not anticipate lifting it was 280, right? What was the name of that stone?
There's no name of that one yet. That's a more recent one that I just found, but yeah, you picked that very well.
We're gonna come up with a name for it. Yeah, when I lifted it, I found there was a moment where you guys were like, no, like chill, like basically saying chill. And I found myself with this freaking stone on my lap, and I found myself almost in a moment of peace and a sense of peace where it was like, whoa, yeah, this stone's not attacking me. Work with the stone. Don't work against the stone. Don't try to haul the stone in a direction that you're forcing it to. And I was kind of reflecting on it the last week when I was doing it. I was like, wow, that is really cool. And I believe it was yourself and Troy. Actually, I think Brian said it too, where lifting a stone is almost like playing chess. And or it's just like you're looking at it and you're just adjusting it accordingly just to be able to get up there. And what I didn't anticipate, because I've lifted heavy things before or heavy for myself, but there was something, it was very meditative. I was very like right there. And I thought that that was so freaking cool. So my thought with that, or my question to you is, what have stones taught you?
I mean, it's a lot of things. Just to touch on what you said there is, yeah, I refer to them stones as a strength puzzle. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to their physical strength, their body mechanics, and every stone is different from every angle. So it is a puzzle you have to figure out. And so your question was, what has stone lifting taught me?
Yeah,
From which respect? Because it's taught me a lot, man.
that's fair. I would say, let's say where stones taught you about you, like where, let's say, so you started lifting stones 2 years ago.
Somewhere in there, a little, just yeah, about two and a bit, but yes.
Sweet. So then from there, from when you started, have you learned any reflections or like moments where you're just like, shit, okay, that's a pretty cool lesson, or something that stuck out, I suppose.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I'm just trying to collect my thoughts on this. It's taught me from the athletic point of view. It's taught me a lot about grit. There's, for instance, yesterday you'd mentioned that 380-pound stone. I managed to get that to my shoulder, which I'm very happy with because that is, as far as non-professional strongmen, like world strongest men type guys, that is one of the heaviest stones that ever has been put on someone's shoulder. And I'm not a very big guy. And to get to that point, it takes a long time. Like those lifts take 25 seconds or so. So the amount of time you have to have with 380 pounds on your chest, sucking the air out of you, it's that grit. It taught me that I have a lot more grit than maybe I thought I did. So it's taught me that. It's taught me, now, this is the part where I have a hard time talking about it because I'm not really a religious or spiritual man at all, especially not religious. But when we went over to Scotland and we went to some of these locations that people have been lifting stones for, excuse me, 5, 6, 7, 800 years, maybe longer. Those are just the years that it's been documented. When you go to those sites and you put your hands on these stones that Highlanders would come and lift, these actual legit warriors, the most badass dudes in that country would go and touch these stones, there's a particular feeling that's there. And I can't decipher whether that's, I've built it up into my head that I know it's significant and therefore I feel it, or if there just is some kind of memory in these lands, or you touch the stone that these, like it'll tear you to shred some of these stones. And people have been bleeding on these stones doing what we're doing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so it's taught me, I guess, I don't know if it's taught me or if I've learned something, but yeah, that there is, I think there's a difference between those two words. But yeah, I've learned that maybe places or and objects can have a bit of a memory, or maybe we have just put that into there because we know the significance. So it's made me think slightly different in that respect as well.
That's really cool. I think I look at it kind of like a pilgrimage kind of style thing, where I think people, when they think of a pilgrimage, it is the act of pursuing some sort of, let's say it's just spiritual enlightenment or some sort of like self actualization. I think that's what people are intending when they do a quote unquote pilgrimage or a rite of passage. And it's just like anything. It is, a pilgrimage is just a very difficult endeavor to show the person what they're capable of, in my opinion. So I think that when we come to that realization, that reflection, or we just see ourselves in a different angle or a different light where it could definitely be a positive contribution, I think that there's nothing more enlightening than that, where we just
Well,
become better human beings from it.
that's what it was. That's the way I looked at the Scotland trip, was a strength pilgrimage, because we toured the country picking up many ancient stones, all of them with different meanings and different histories. And my dad's dad is Nisbet. That's my last name. My dad's mom was Doer, and Doer actually translate from Gaelic is to mean a pilgrim. So it was kind of interesting how that had worked out. I didn't realize that before I started doing some research before I left. But yeah, I completely agree.
That's super cool, man. That's super cool. So something that I think we were chatting about it pre recording, but I think it's definitely something to touch on, because lifting a 380-pound stone is freaking ridiculous. It's awkward to do, it's awkward to watch. And we were just talking about safety and how there's a lot of people that comment stuff. It's like, oh, there goes your back. Tell me about that. Like, what is it that people get wrong about the idea of lifting stones?
Well, people, to be honest, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, to be honest, right? Like, I mean, okay, there's a couple things to that. So there's more studies coming out now from the biomechanical side that lifting even a deadlift with a slightly flexed spine is not going to hurt you, especially if you've been training that way. So this whole old methodology of, oh, if your back is not perfectly flat, then you're going to hurt yourself is bullshit, to be honest. That's been disproven. Now, obviously, a tremendous amount of curved spine, of course, you can hurt yourself doing anything if you lift something out of your capability. But if you've been training a certain way and you've developed those muscles, then you're fine, right? Like people all the time like to say, oh yeah, you're going to blow your back out. It's like, actually, it's quite the opposite. I'm bulletproofing my back. The way that you build a strong back is by lifting heavy weight. You have to shock your body. You have to put your body in uncomfortable positions so that you're able to build that strength there. So I'm actually doing the opposite. And the thing that's interesting about stone versus something like a deadlift, as I mentioned before, Kyle, the average man could probably grind in a horrific way up a 350-pound deadlift. It would be terrible form, and that's how you could hurt yourself. But because stones, are pulled right from the ground instead of 8 3/4 inches like a deadlift is, it's harder to pick up a stone from the ground. You're going to have to use less load. There's a balance there. There's a grip element there. So it's not likely somebody's going to get hurt lifting a stone, especially right off the bat, because they're just not going to be able to handle the kind of load that would put them in a position or with a kind of load that will injure them. If that makes any sense. Kind of use the word load a few too many times there, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. Uh, I'm trying to think of how to summarize that. So with the load, having a it's not the amount, it's actually the training intention.
Let me
Shit.
rephrase it there. So
Yeah,
no. So I think that you're less likely to get hurt with stones because you just cannot lift the same amount of weight. Right? So if you look, for instance, you look at World's Strongest Men, I think it was in 2019, they used something called the Odd Hogan Tombstone, and I believe it's 420 pounds. Okay. Now their goal was to get it to their shoulder, which is insane. Now they were able to use a tacky towel, which you don't use on natural stones, but Odd lets it on his. It's World's Strongest Men. Now these World's Strongest Men can deadlift 800, 900, 1,000 pounds, and a lot of these World's Strongest Men guys couldn't pick up 420 pounds. Okay, so some of these guys could not pick up half of what their deadlift is. So their backs are rated for a certain amount of weight, and they couldn't even get half to that, right? And so you translate that to the average person, even if they're not a strength athlete. If the average guy could grind up a 350-pound deadlift, maybe he could get a 200-pound stone up, and a 200-pound stone, if you're picking it up somewhat appropriately, is not likely to blow your back out, right? If you can find a way to make 200 pounds blow you apart, but if you have somebody showing you what to do, which is what we do with new people, we teach them the basics, you're just not going to get hurt doing that.
That's crazy. And on that note too, one, thank you very much for teaching me.
Oh
Like
man.
the dudes helped out so much. And the other part, oh shoot, where was I going with that one? So teaching, that was awesome. And then I actually thought I was going to be a hell of a lot sore than I ended up being. And that actually surprised me quite a bit. I actually still felt really like I felt like not fresh because I'm just a freaking mess anyways. Well, not a mess, but I felt surprisingly good. And you know what? I'll actually tell you this too, like thinking about it. After the stone sesh, I had such a good sleep. And I think what kind of happened is there's just so much adrenaline because it was so fresh and so new, where it just kind of I think we're really wound up. Like we're just always go, 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 go. And I think we need like some people do use workouts, right? I've used workouts for a stress release or stress relief, or just a way of just calming myself down because I'm really wired and wound up and like high energy. I'm a high energy person. I'm like a gerbil. And man, I slept so good after that because it hits so many parts of the central nervous system, and it just like it flushed out a lot of stuff, and it was just amazing. So yeah,
Yeah, I was going to touch on that actually. So first of all, for everybody listening, Kyle came down and had his first stone session, and Kyle, you're what? You're 165 pounds somewhere there,
yeah,
and you
160
stood
or
with
165.
okay, and you stood with a 280-pound stone, which is extraordinary for anybody to stand with a 280-pound stone. Their first time is very, very high level, and you did it at a very light body weight, and you even lapped a 309-pound stone. So for everyone listening, Kyle is a beast, and he's very good at this. You have you're good. Clearly all your strength training in the past is worked well to build you up for this stuff. So congrats for that. But also you touched on it with not being overly sore because again the loads are smaller than a deadlift. You're usually just doing singles with a stone. You don't work any particular muscle group too much. It is essentially like your central nervous system gets strained for sure. So you can't lift heavy stones all the time, but it is a different way of training. Now you can, like when I'm prepping for stone lifting competitions, sure I do high reps, and you can turn it into the equivalent of barbell work. That's easily done. But usually the way that we go when we go and play, it's singles, maybe a double, and you try a bunch of different stones. But if you look at the amount of volume we do next to say maybe a powerlifting workout, it's going to be a lot smaller. So that's why that's why no one part of your body gets overworked. First of all, because you use your whole body, but also the volume itself is much lower.
That's freaking sweet. I and also I think something that got me really intrigued with the idea of like having you on the podcast as well is I find that your research and your interest and the freaking knowledge bombs you're not just a hat rack dude when it comes to the history of stones. And I think one thing that Brian recommended, uh, you'll probably know the documentary bear. It started with an F, Fulkerster.
Yes.
Full Sturker. So I started watching that a little bit, and something I thought that was really cool is that in Iceland, the could be everywhere, but just in this documentary, they were talking about how the stone that you can lift, whether it's to the lap or standing straight up, is equivalent to rations. So if you get it on your lap, then you get half rations. If you can stand up, full rations. And what they keep on reiterating in this documentary is that strength leads to success. They're like, strength is an indicator of success. If you wanted to feed your family, get stronger. If you wanted to contribute to the community, get stronger. And it's Iceland too. And that's like the breeding ground, in my opinion, of just mental grit and just physical anomalies that are just far beyond like the average individual. And I think it's crazy, but it was definitely like the history part that I think is so interesting. It's so
Yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. And so there's a couple things to that. So Iceland is the full Stricker, half Stricker is what you're thinking of. And they also have a Moli, which is the smallest amount. And so it wasn't how high you could lift it, it was which stone you could lift.
Mm.
And so that would be, there's actually full Stricker stones all over the country. My brother and I do a podcast called the Stones of Strength podcast. And we're only on episode 2, but our last guest who came on a couple days ago, Ryan Stewart, is actually one of the most knowledgeable humans on the planet and actually researches ancient stones, goes there and finds them. So we had a great chat with him. But basically, stone lifting and displays of strength was your job interview. So Iceland, it was more based around the fishing. So depending on how strong you were, it depends where you would be on the boat, how much rations you would get for food to feed you, how much money you would get paid. If you go over to Sweden, it was same idea, but for farm hands, it was your job interview. If you could pick up the biggest stone, you were called full god drang. If you could pick up the second biggest, it was hell drang and going down, and you would put that on the stump of a tree. So again, that would be your job interview. If you could pick up the biggest stone, it was a demonstration of strength and grit, and they knew you'd be able to work harder, so you would get more money, more food for your family. And strength used to be, we're fortunate to live in a very safe and comfortable world these days, and we train for health and for fun, but the world wasn't like that before. We would have to fight wars. People were working hard, right? And so the amount of strength you had was an example of the kind of person you were, the kind of leader you were, the amount of work you could put in, the amount of like the kind of warrior you were. So the more it was basically a reflection of your social status as well as your physical prowess. So it was a lot more ingrained than people really realize. So yeah, that full Stricker documentary by Rogue is great. There's also one called Stoneland and the Levantadores by Rogue. And if anybody has their interest peaked at all, by this kind of stuff, I would highly recommend checking those out. Or there's one called the Utah Stones of Strength as well. That's a newer one, but also really good to check out.
That's really cool. So something that you were talking about earlier, it was the history of the stone or experiencing. I think energy flows. Like I think what you were talking about, where when you're holding on to this stone and you're feeling the energy or the energy of the past kind of thing. I think that energy definitely travels through time because it's not limited to the concepts of like whatever we kind of got going on. I think energy just does its own thing. So I definitely think there's something to that. So what's been what has been one of the more significant stones kind of overall that you've had the opportunity to lift?
I'm gonna give you two, if that's okay.
Of course.
So, well, shit. I lifted something called the Dinny Stones, which are very popular. They're done in the Arnold's now. They have replicas there, and that's a very popular one. There's 733 pounds between the two of them. So that was kind of a cool feat to do because that's become a very popular one. But the two I want to touch on is something called the Fianna Stone. And that was the one I'd originally mentioned about there being a feeling in the area. So the Fianna were Irish warriors, but they also had them in Scotland too. And this is where I went to go lift the Fianna Stone. And they were essentially the Highlander Special Forces. You had to be able to lift the Fianna Stone. You had to be able to jump the length of your kilt, and you had to be able to run at full speed and duck under a sword held at shoulder height without breaking stride. So these guys were badasses. And so it was really cool to go to this glen, this valley that they had there, where people would travel from all over the Highlands to try and basically become one of these Fianna warriors. So that was a really neat feeling. And then we went up the next day after that to a place called Strathmore. Now, Strathmore is when you're getting way, way, way up into the Highlands near the top of Scotland. And the Strathmore of Durna stone is 355 pounds, which is not crazy big, but it is a decent size. But it was the area where the Vikings came down and met the Picts. Now, the Picts are not a very well-known people, but the Picts held off both the Vikings and the Romans. Those were two groups of people that would, sorry for the language, but fuck up everybody in their path. But the Picts were able to hold them off. Now, the Strathmore of Durna stone was about, I believe, was a kilometer or two from an ancient Pictish broch that's about 22 to 2,400 years old. A broch is an old dwelling. So you're in this absolutely ancient part of Scotland where the Vikings came down, and there's this stone. Now, we don't know how long it was lifted for. I think it's been documented maybe 400 or 500 years, but people got to realize it's not like somebody goes, okay, so we have this lifting stone and now it's on paper on day one, right? It could have been lifted. Like I'm just saying it could have been lifted for a couple hundred years more. We don't know before anybody like put it on paper, right? So we're just estimating at that point, but it's a really, really neat feeling to be up there. And my brother and I, as far as we can tell, I think I was the sixth or seventh, and then he was either the seventh or eighth people who have lifted that stone in modern times. So to put your hands on and be kind of right at the start of this stone coming back in is a very, very cool feeling.
I would imagine, dude. That's super freaking cool, man. Would you do you think, well, I guess it would probably be a little bit biased, but like let's say objectively, do you think having stone lifting as a regular, do you think integrating stone lifting into I guess like a rite of passage that'd be kind of a regular thing? Do you think people would benefit that?
Yes.
Yeah, fair enough. That was
It
what,
was.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
they
was just
would.
answering my own question as I was going. I was like, I just lifted a fucking stone last week. Of course, I like that's totally biased.
Well, it was a rite of passage traditionally, right? So just to focus specifically on Scotland again, the stones in Scotland are much smaller than other places in the world. Now, there is a reason for that. So, like I'd mentioned, in Iceland, it is about for the biggest, strongest guys to be on the fishing boats, which didn't have motors. They had to row their way out, right? Like we're talking about very, very strong men. Same within Sweden, working as a farmman, you had to be very strong. In Scotland, the stones are much smaller because it was in there it was called it's a manhood stone. So what that would be for not everywhere, but for some of these places, it was for young boys or young teens, I should say, 13, 14, to be able to test themselves enough to be able to train with spears and swords. So if you couldn't break that stone off the ground or lift that stone, you were not ready to train with stones, or pardon me, to train with weapons. So it quite literally was a rite of passage for these people. So it is I don't know. I think most people, especially in the strength community, would benefit from some this kind of work. It's just a really neat experience. It's very difficult, and I don't know, just maybe this isn't quite on your question, and I'm sorry if I'm getting on a tangent here, but I'd explain this to you just about building grit. When we were talking at the stone session the other day, I'd made the point that, like, one of the stones I lifted, the 408-pound devil's potato stone, that was a max effort lift for me. And I fought with that all last summer before I got it. And those attempts were 40 seconds. So imagine 40 seconds of max effort, right? So if you translate that even to a barbell, whether it's a bench, a squat, a deadlift, at 75% of your max, even with a dumbbell, try making any lift that's even 75% of your max last 40 seconds and see how that feels, right? So that's what's really interesting about it, is it builds a type of grit, a type of patience, a type of confidence that I think most people could use in their training. And, these things do transfer over to life, man. Like, if you hit a max rep or accomplish a goal or anything, that feeling of confidence you get is going to make you walk more upright, and you're going to just tackle everything around you just a little bit more confidently because you've done something really, really hard and proved yourself to yourself.
I completely agree, man. Yeah, it's such a cool concept. And then it's not just because I thought it was cool when you mentioned Leo da Vinci. You also break horseshoes, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I've done quite a bit of that. Yeah. I
That's
can't,
pretty
you
cool.
want me to get into that or just
Well, I guess what would, just because I'm learning of this now, so is it
sure.
the idea is to bend the horseshoe or completely break it into?
Both. So
Okay.
during COVID, when all of the competitions for strongman were shut down because I was competing in strongman, uh, I wanted to work on my grip. And a buddy of mine had talked to me about, there's something called steel bending. And it sounds as weird as it's weird, but it's kind of the combination of old time strongman and grip strength where it combines. And it's bending bolts, bending nails, and bending horseshoes. And I dove into that pretty hard because I was really enjoying it. And then there was a podcast for that show, and I'd heard guys were bending horseshoes. And that goes back to the days of Leonardo da Vinci. He used to bend horseshoes. So I got onto that, and the first day I bent a horseshoe, I'd actually listened to a podcast about how guys were breaking them. So I broke a horseshoe, and I saw how long it took me, and it was pretty quick. And so I worked at it a few more times, and I was getting very fast at breaking horseshoes, like under 5 minutes. And people, because what you have to do, sorry, is you have to bend the horseshoe and then continue bending it as quick as you can, heating the steel up, changing its molecular makeup until it breaks. Now, what happens is if you let off at all, that metal is going to cool and it's going to be work hardened, and so it's going to make it even harder for you. So you kind of have to go all out as long as you can until that horseshoe breaks or you break. So I got to the point where I was breaking horseshoes in under 45 seconds, and nobody had ever done that. And so I actually I have a certified world record for the fastest horseshoe snap. And so, yeah, I did that. I enjoyed that. I think I got to the point where I was breaking them, because when you normally do horseshoe snapping, you put leather wraps around it. There's certain size that you're allowed to use just for leverage and to protect your hands. And I got to the point where I was breaking them barehanded. And I even broke a horseshoe into three pieces barehanded. And from what I've been able to tell from all the people I've talked to that know this, I'm the only person that has ever done that.
That's pretty
So
sweet, dude.
yeah, it's weird. It was a weird rabbit hole, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know if that answered your question or not, but
no,
that's, yeah.
I honestly, it's a curiosity question. It's all good. I bet you back in the day, Leonardo da Vinci was probably just like, okay, I'm going to examine this and then I'm just going to think of like the most effective way, like using it and just because there was a lot of talk. This is like a Leo da Vinci tangent, but there is a lot of things that people mention where he was he was not only a polymath and very, very intelligent and curious, but he was also shreddies. like people, well, not shreddies, but he had physical prowess. Like people
Right.
recognize him as being a fit human being. He wasn't just, he was like, yeah, he got that physical, mental, artistic, creative, personable. It's like very, very cool. But when you mentioned that he did the horseshoe break, and I was like, oh fuck, okay, that makes sense as to why he was so freaking jacked. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
So cool.
yeah. So one of the interesting things about the steel bending, you might find this quite cool, is if you think of any type of lifting or training, there's a load, right? So if you put a barbell on your back, the weight is the load. If you pick a deadlift off the ground, the weight is the load. If you do a pull up, your body is the load. If you do a push up, your body is the load. A piece of steel weighs almost nothing. So it's the only type of training that I've ever thought of that you create the load from inside of you. You are taking something that weighs nothing and you are recruiting, like, so steel's all rated, okay? So there's whole different like rosters and stuff for this kind of thing, and they've rated these bolts. Like the hardest bolt I've ever bent, and I'm still ranked number 2 in the world for that, is approximately 1,400 pounds of pressure to have bent that. Now you get to use wraps, which create leverage, of course. So that may be what it takes to bend the bolt. I'm not saying I put that much force into it, but what you got to think about with these is if a bolt's 600 pounds to bend, you have to find 600 pounds worth of tension and strength in your body, and using your whole body, focusing all of your energy into a small piece that weighs nothing, and then bending it. It's a very unique, I know it's strange on the surface, but when you actually do it, and you see the amount of whole body muscle recruitment as well as mental toughness you need for it, because it hurts like hell, man. Your hands get very sore, and our bodies have fail safes that if you're doing something that hurts, your body steps start sending or stop sending the signals to your muscles to fire, right? There's fail safes. So you need to recondition your brain and your body to push through those fail safes. So it's quite an interesting concept on a number of levels. And that's more what I liked about it than the fact that I'm bending a piece of metal. It's the like the whole package is a very fascinating way to train, and way to train your mind and your body.
That's freaking sweet, dude. Yeah, you got the ticker. You got the ticker thinking, man. You got the thinker thinking. Man, that's super, super cool. So, do you have a Guinness Book of World Records certificate for?
Yes, not Guinness. And my buddies bust my balls about this all the time. And I'll tell you why I didn't go with Guinness. I talked to a number of people that have done world records, and it's called Record Holder Republic that I went with. And to get a Record Holder Republic, you need to pay $0. And what you need to do though is you need to prove to them that it's a worthy record. Guinness Book of World Records can cost you $10,000 to get, and you can do anything you want. So with Guinness, I think somebody has a world record for wearing the most amount of t-shirts at one time. Okay.
Mhm.
You pay your money, they'll take your money and give you whatever record you want. A friend of mine I was telling you about before, he wanted to do set some records for charity. And even for charity, it was going to cost him $10,000 to get a record. Or you go through Record Holder Republic that has all of the same records. It's not like you have a Guinness Book of World Record for one thing and a Record Holder Republic for another thing. It's not. It's all the same information. It's just that one costs you $0, and you actually have to tell them what the record is, and they decide whether or not that's worthy of even being a record. So it's actually harder to get one of those in that respect, or you just pay a ton of money and do whatever you want, and Guinness goes, here you go. It's a business, right?
Mm.
So that's why I didn't go with Guinness. So I get a hard time about that, and I get it, man. It's funny, but yeah, I do have in my gym on my wall, I have a certified world record for that.
That's pretty sweet. I don't know what world record I would go for, but it would be pretty cool just to say that to have a world record.
Yeah,
I think it'd
well,
just be neat.
throw $10,000 in Guinness, and you can do whatever you
Yeah. I don't think I would want to go that route. I'd want to do something that's actually cool.
want.
It's just an exchange of like funds. Ah, that's silly, man. Fair enough. I
Yeah,
totally understand. That totally makes sense. That
yeah, for sure.
I didn't know the rest of that. But now that you mentioned it, there's been a lot of really silly world records that's been popped out too. So Crazy. So with what else would I want to go with for stone lifting? For stone lifting, you mentioned that there is natural stone and then there is not natural stone. Natural stone, could you go through those
Oh yeah, so
differences?
most people are familiar with Atlas stones, right? They're used in strongman competitions. They're the big poured concrete balls. Those actually originate from natural stones. There's something called the Inver stone in Scotland, which I lifted when I was there. And the Inver stone led to a series of string stones called the McGlashan stones. And from there, there was the influence for the world's strongest men style Atlas stones. So most people know what an Atlas stone is, or if they saw it, they would go, "Oh yeah, that's the thing the guys on TV pick up," right? So that actually evolves from natural stone lifting. And so yeah, so there's natural stones, which are stones that'll come from the ground, from the river, or whatever, and then you have the poured concrete Atlas stones.
Sweet. Um, Something that was also really kind of cool, and I think I was joking with Brian where because it's you, and then I believe you said it was your brother, and then it's your cousin as well, and all of you have a thing for stones, or at least some sort of stone related or earth related, and I think unless your last name Nisbet means something really freaking cool in Gaelic, but I think if you had the last name Stone, I think it would be very appropriate to you given your family, dude. So,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Nisbet actually does mean a large protuberance from the ground. So it is like a big stone outcrop, man.
that is too appropriate,
Yes, it is.
dude. That's actually hilarious. So the thing that was really cool with that, and it was your brother that yeah, and he was the one that said, yeah, the stone was from way up north, and it came down with the when the ice age, when the ice was melting, and it would come along down with that. So you actually have not only just information of historical reasonings behind stones, but you have also the history of the stone at your disposal because of what your brother does. Is what
He's a geologist, so
okay.
that's his education, that's his profession. And so yeah, so we to touch on that, locally we have something we've started called the Edmonton Stones of Strength. I've yammered on a lot about the Scottish and the Icelandic and Swedish stones. Those all are historical stones that you can go lift. They all have a story. We don't have the stone lifting history here, so but we love stone
Yet.
lifting yet. Well, that's fair enough, man. Yeah, and so we have started local stones of strength that if anyone from Edmonton is listening, our Instagram page is Edmonton Stones of Strength. Hit us up there, and if you want to give it a try, we love having new people out. And yeah, so where I'm getting at with this is we've got a collection of lifting stones, and my brother being a geologist is just kind of cool because he dissects what everything is, what kind of stone it is, and he'll go. I mean, he can't say with certainty, and he admits that because you have to get it tested exactly. But some of the stones would be like, there's very likely this came from 12 or 1300 kilometers up north because we don't have this type of sedimentary rock, excuse me, here. So yeah, we get a bit of a history because all that stuff. I mean, those stones were left where they are now, where we dig them out from the river valley when there was woolly mammoths walking where we are now, type thing. So it's kind of cool. The last those things were left here at the same time that there were short faced bear and saber toothed tigers where we are. So it's quite cool. It's nerdy, but it's cool.
Dude, like I just like zoomed out on that, just like thinking about it, where it's just that the history just period is just like it's actually blowing my mind. It's blowing my mind that there is such a huge history just from people participating and interacting with stones and the symbolism and the well, I guess effectiveness of the stones to help organize individuals while also so that's just like 600 to 1,000 ish, maybe probably more than that.
More,
Could be
yeah.
10,000, 12,000, but then it's even further back. It's like, yeah, we're lifting stones. It's literally lifting history, not only from the symbolic storytelling component, not even from the test of might and grit, but also from a point of history that it's the closest thing to time travel where another person's hands were, or a saber-toothed tiger's paw was on a very stone that we're picking up. And that's just
Pretty
it.
wild.
That to me, like, it blows my mind because I think that there's in our minds we can imagine time travel. I think that time travel from like a quantum physics, like our like when we can imagine it, we can look at the ideas, we can look at the documents, how you were describing the rite of passage, jump the kill, duck the sword, carry this weight, uh, which I said that pretty smooth. I'm pretty surprised by
Yeah, that was pretty sick.
that. So there's that, and then just the expansion of everything past that. It's truly like it feels like I feel it like right in my gut where it's like, whoa, I feel a more connectedness. There we go. I feel like a connectedness with the bigger oneness.
Well, it's what it is. You're connecting with history and you're connecting with the earth all at the same time.
Cool. I like how efficient that is. That's so sweet. So is there a would there be would the devil's potato be the main thing that you is the devil's potato on the way to a bigger stone that you want to lift? Is there your great white buffalo? Is there like your Moby Dick of a stone?
I thought that was going to be the Agaili stone. I was hoping. So it's kind of. So how do I put this? We are creating the Edmonton Stones of Strength because we love it, because we want to train, but also for the people that come after us to walk in and have these challenges. If if these stones were, if somebody else had done what we're doing, then we would have all of these challenges laid out in front of us and we could line them up and it would already be there. But we're making this, right? And so that's a really cool thing. But then yes, you're right. I do need to create my own challenges, right? And so the Agaili stone was going to be that based on the weight and size of that bugger. Getting it to shoulder would have been a lifelong dream. And I was kind of hoping that maybe I could get it by the end of summer if I worked really hard. And then somehow my first session, I got it to my shoulder. And now I want to get it again and control it. It kind of got up there. I put the arm out to show control and then I dropped it because that's a lot of weight on your shoulder. But so I'd like to get that better. But as far as, the setting out those goals is I need to find a new one now, right? Because we're the ones doing that. And the way that my broken brain works is I kind of always have to be chasing something just because that helps, man. Like that, it really helps. So there's actually, you might kind of like this. So I was told about this Olympic rower, and this rower wrote a book, and I haven't read the book, so I'm sure there's a lot in there that I'm missing. But the concept of it was the tagline is basically does it make the boat go faster? Meaning that everything this person does in their life, this person asked, will this action help make the boat go faster? And so that just struck a chord with me because I didn't word it that way. But when I'm training for a competition or a specific feat, I try and organize my life and my actions around, will it make the weight feel lighter type thing. So having those goals help focus me. And so I'm getting back to the original point though. So now I need to find new goals to try and push myself so that I can focus my energy, my efforts, and everything towards something. Now, I want to go on a trip next year to Iceland and lift some of the stones there. But as far as short-term goals, it's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have to find, or I'm gonna have to find another one to try and chase down, because it just makes it more fun if you're chasing a goal. That sense of accomplishment when you accomplish the goal is a lot bigger than if I just go and spin the wheels. You know what I mean? And that's fun. It's fun to just go spin the wheels, lift this and that. And I love that. And I do that. But I do find that having that goal or that thing I'm chasing is also very, very motivating mentally.
Yeah. Because then you have, well, it's purpose behind it too. There's like a reason behind the actions. And I think that if we're similar to dogs, where if we don't have a purpose, we're just going to be digging holes. We got to go for
Sure.
walks. So we have the purpose of like lifting stones. Maybe you'll start juggling stones. I don't know. Your shoulders will
I
be
like
freaking jacked. Just like instead of lateral raises, we just juggle stones.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. What would I'm just because just out of curiosity, do you think that or is there a stone in mind where there is that kind of challenge, or if you've thought of it at all?
Not locally, but what I think I need to, like, my biggest challenge, I want to carry the Husafell stone, which was in that movie Full Sturker.
Mm.
Now that's a 410-pound stone that you have to carry 98 feet around an old goat pen. And it's known as, like, it's one of the most famous lifting stones on the planet. And it's a serious feat. Like, that's twice my body weight. So that's kind of like the long-term goal that I'm chasing, is I need to adapt my system to be able to carry that kind of weight. Like, I carried 356 pounds, about 75 feet a couple weeks ago, and that's without really training carries. And so I think this is answering your question, but like, that's something in my mind that I am slowly training and working towards, is adapting myself for that. But that's more of a long-term goal versus a short-term. So I might have to find a different short-term goal, or just do better job of the ones that I've already done. But as of right now, the answer is no. I don't have that real specific one. I kind of checked that off the list yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Oh, not
Yeah.
so easy, man. It
No,
hurts.
it looked
I'm
like it
hurting
was a
today a bit.
struggle. I
Yeah.
think that was like I think it was probably, I don't know, it seemed like it was a 40 seconds, like a 40-second video. So I imagine it would probably take about 40 seconds that took you to get that
Yeah.
380-pound stone to your shoulder.
25 to 30, somewhere in there, I think, for that one. Yeah, that's a
Nice.
lot of time under tension, man. It's hard.
Dude, it looked fun. I was sweating watching.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so good. What is it? Where how actually this is a good one. I guess a grit would be the answer, but how would how is your stone lifting? How do you theorize, or how do you think your stone lifting will impact your young boys?
Oh, they love it all, man. They see a rock and they lift it. The same with my brother Dale's, his boys, especially his youngest. They see it, they lift it. They just, well, you were there last week with them, so it we had a training session, and often we have training sessions down at our site in the River Valley, and there's fire bans. We couldn't have a fire, but a lot of times we just make it a community thing or a family thing where we'll go lift stones. Like, I made my little guys those little wooden swords, and so while we're lifting stones, my 2 and 5-year-old are behind us in the bushes, being boys, jumping off of big stones, hitting trees with swords and that kind of thing. So I think it's already positively impacting them. Being, a lot of that's missed these days, the rough and tumble play, the exploration and all these things, and just seeing them light up like, oh, dad, get over here, you got to see this one. And they're exploring and finding this stuff and jumping off of it. And I think that stuff's really important for children. And so already I think it's impacting them in a positive way. They look forward to going down and seeing the guys, as they say, and playing in the bush while we're all doing our things. And I think it's important for children to play, but I also think it's important for children to be able to comfortably interact with adults. And so I'm hoping that's something that, as they go on, as they grow, that they're able to be comfortable around adults. And I hope someday, like, that they look back and see the stuff that I've done, and this stuff that I've built, and go, well, that's pretty cool. Even if they're not interested in it, like, I hope they think it's cool. Like, I had that opportunity with my parents. My dad and mom run Ironman triathlons, which is swim 4K, bike 180, and then run 42. And that wasn't something that really interested me that much, but they started a charity organization that's raised over $8 million for cancer research through it. So watching them build this team of people, they had over 200 people from all around the world at one point, and like, they were on TSN for it. And so I grew up watching my parents use athletics to build community, and that kind of resonated really, like, a lot with me. And so obviously we're not raising $8 million by lifting stones, but still, that aspect of community, mixing community and athletics, is something that I think is really cool. And I hope that my boys take some of that to heart, because I don't know, I think it's important. I think a lot of people connect to that stuff.
I completely agree. I think I like the focus on, I like that overview, like that Venn diagram or Zen diagram, where I like the community and the athletics, because I think a majority of peeps usually get, or usually miss the community aspect. Like, let's say athletes, even when they come out from high school athletics, they don't feel that same sense of community because they view themselves within the community or within that particular endeavor. And some people find that it's difficult, or I find that some people have difficulty finding that community because they could be like just they just never tried something else. They don't know another variation of it. But I definitely agree that there is it's, I don't know how that saying is, but it's about like the boats lifting up together, like going through something difficult or having that grit or that, uh, that perseverance, that practice and perseverance. I think that that's what really uplifts everybody and that it perpetuates outwards. And that I think is something so beautiful and so simple in a way that it's undeniable the improvements community and athletic endeavors has on individuals for sure, without a
Absolutely.
doubt.
With you kind of hit the nail on the head there for what my brother has told me about. So my brother was a lifelong athlete. Well, I have two brothers, Dale and Brett, and Dale's the one that I do stone lifting with. Dale was an extraordinary wrestler. He was a high level rugby player. And then he went to university to be a geologist. And that part of his life, like he ran 5 Ironmans after that, but he lost a lot of that. He didn't train much for those. He's a freak, but he told me like he lost that aspect of community. And so when the stone lifting stuff started and he started lifting, and not only did he immediately connect with the lifting of the stones, but he openly speaks about how he didn't realize how much that camaraderie and that aspect of community he was missing in his life. So he's really attached himself from that aspect too. And he's the one who had the idea for the podcast we're doing. And so he's helping bring that aspect of community internationally to the stone lifting community. And so, yeah, I mean, everything you've said, I completely agree. And that's the community side, but also to touch on the athletic side of it, like Troy, who you met, he's the one that runs the local stone lifting competitions. He's an extraordinary man and an extraordinary lifter, but him and I are at similar levels and we'll push each other. I don't even want to say it's a friendly competition because I feel no competition with him, but it's just that when you have two people at very similar levels, we piggyback off of each other's success because I'll prove that a lift can be done, then he'll do it. He'll prove that another lift can be done, and then I'll do it. And so you have a chance to actually grow together. And I think that everybody's going to benefit from that kind of situation.
Absolutely, it's a lot more collaborative than uh I guess defensive, where people
Absolutely.
it's because I think when people, or I think when I focus or when I view things from a creative outlet or a creative point of view or a creative perspective, it's easier to see the art in the action.
Sure.
And given getting that bit of experience and the tips that all of you guys had, where it's creativity to get the stone from point A to point B. And Rick Rubin talks about, and get the book for sure, Creative Act, A Way of Being. I think you would like it quite a bit. And something that he says is that there is no focus on collaboration rather than competition. Think of the project, not about your personal feelings in the project, because then you can have different musicians, because he works with music. You can have different musicians collaborating on different things. It's like if you look at Eminem and Aerosmith. Actually, if you look at Aerosmith and basically anyone in rap, I suppose, because the DMX, or not DMX, Run DMC, they did a lot of work with too. But those are like collaboratives, two different genres coming together, collaborative, and then increases. So it's cool. It's cool having the collaborative kind of component because it's uplifting everyone. And if we're able to have clarity on the collaboration, then we find ourselves speeding up the process rather than allowing our temporary feelings or resentment, I suppose, of, oh, this person's so much better than me. I don't want to do this because that person's awesome. It would be like if I didn't go to lift stones because you guys are lifting 380 and I lifted 280. So it was pretty sweet. But it would be like, oh, I don't want to go because I don't think I'm strong enough to lift stones. And it's like, no, no, no. It's not about who the strongest lifter is. It is about collaborating and uplifting everybody to be able to lift stones to the best of their ability, or to adjust things this way or that way. And the thing that I really like about it is that it's a motley crew. Like, all of us have different backgrounds, and I believe that a common denominator, there's always common denominators. And if the physical activity that can be done for everybody is lifting stones, and it can attract a variety of different personality types or individuals, I think that's so freaking cool. I'm kind of just thinking of it on the fly here, but that is just a really cool um, baseline collaboration, organization, community. And with the variety of individuals, you get so many cool different perspectives, but everyone's there for the same reason, the same intention. And that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I think, yeah, I agree with all of that. And just to touch on the one thing that you'd said about, you'd mentioned, I forget exactly how you worded it, but being afraid to come down because we're lifting one weight and you couldn't lift the other.
Mm.
I think people, if anybody's curious and coming to try this stuff out, please don't be intimidated by it. I think you need to understand one of the coolest things about stone lifting, because it is so difficult. It doesn't matter how big of a stone you lift, it's the fight that you have with the stone. So one of my favorite lifts I've ever seen was Brian, who's been on your show and is a mutual friend of ours. He picked up a 275-pound stone. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's really not that heavy, but the battle he had with it was absolutely extraordinary. And the amount of grit and strength he showed in that fight, that's what it's about. That embodies what we do. Like, the weight doesn't matter. It's the battle you have with that stone. That's really cool. So please, if anyone's listening, and don't ever be deterred because of that. You need to, there's a stone for everyone. Like, it's just about pushing yourself. It truly, truly is.
Dude. Yeah. Yeah. Because I will admit, I was totally one of those. I think Brian was consistently, like, we chat once a week for sure. And he's consistent. He's like, hey, you coming to Stones? Hey, you coming to Stones? Are you coming to Stones? Hey, are you coming to Stones? And last week he asked me on Friday, you coming to Stones? I'm like, fuck it. Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah.
It was literally 24 hours. I'm like, fuck it. Just go. And man, so good. Yeah, I freaking love it. And definitely the battle. Oh my gosh. Now I'm just like reflecting on it. Oh, so good. Well, my man, a lot of knowledge bombs, a lot of thoughts, a lot of organization. Is there anything that you want to mention that I haven't asked you about by any chance?
No, I don't think so, man. I think we covered a lot of it. No, I appreciate you having me on. It's fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm this is going to be one of many that I'll probably have you on. Eventually, I'll have in-person podcasts. Ooh, that's where the real magic's gonna happen, my man.
Cool.
Yeah. It'll just be like we'll just sit on a couple stones and just hang out and just, I don't know, with some
Yeah,
microphones.
that'd be sick.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. Actually, something I'll just tell you this one because it's kind of cool. But on the software that I use for podcast recording, it's also an app on my phone. So even if we were at the Granite Garden, as it is called, and I press record, we could actually have a podcast right then and there too.
It'd be a blast. There'd just be so much shit talking and chirping. It'd be hilarious, man.
Yeah,
And
it would
that's
be really fun.
actually, that's something I'll touch on real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah,
So
of course.
I want to give a shout out to Troy. I mentioned him a few times, but he's the one that kind of brought a lot of the stone lifting culture to Edmonton before we started the Edmonton Stones of Strength. He started a competition called Alberta's Strongest Viking, and it's all natural stones or natural implements. And it's kind of a neat vibe. If anybody listening has done powerlifting or strongman, there's usually a certain feel at events that is really tense and really intense, and there's a lot of ego. But you go to a competition like Troy holds, and because it's just a whole different world. Like, the first couple events, for example, this year were pretty intense, and people were working really hard at it. But then you get to like the stone throwing, the stone lifting, and it just turns into a big friendly chirp fest. And that, I mean that in the best way possible. Like, everybody is so lighthearted, having so much fun, making hilarious jokes. No one's feelings are hurt. Everybody's laughing, and it's just a very unique unique vibe to it. And I think that that's a really cool element of all of this. And we hosted an event called The Gathering last year. And that's based off of what they used to do in the ancient Highlands is they would host a gathering of the clans and everybody would get together and perform and drink and lift stones and all of that kind of shit. And so they host that competition and that event in Scotland. And we know the organizers and they very kindly let us use that name here, which is a big compliment. But where I'm getting to with this is we had there's about 20 athletes come. We had 5 events, and this one wasn't even a competition. It was just everybody pushing themselves as hard as they physically could. But there was no winner, there was no loser. It was just that aspect of community and encouragement. And I think that that's a really, really unique thing in this world that we're building here and that we do. And yeah, it's just very, very fun. There's a lot more aspect on fun and community than just who's the strongest, because it's not about that, like I'd said.
That's so cool. Man, I'm so glad that you said yes to this podcast, because I just got to like a couple little neuro shifts happen there. And it's just really cool little knowledge bombs that you're presenting something that may seem silly in a light of tremendous, maybe not tremendous, but in a way where it's something so simple that has so much empowerment and so much power behind the messaging. Actually, I think it's the messaging and how you're bringing it to the table, dude. And I think that there's going to be many times, and there's going to be many people that is going to be positively impacted by lifting stones. Like it's kind of interesting to think that. And I, without a doubt in my mind, like hearing about it, experiencing it, and then this podcast, I can see where things could be going. And I think that that's going to be very cool. And I think what I'm really drawn to it by is the simplicity of it. And we always want to complicate. We want to do more. We want to do faster. We want to do like always go. But it's like, no. Just pick up a stone. Just pick up a stone. And I think
Yeah.
that is awesome. I think that's
Yeah.
freaking awesome, dude.
There's a massive simplicity to it. Like there's so many layers to it, right? People like I get guys bust my balls and it's funny, but like, oh, so you go pick up rocks. It's like, yeah, okay. That's what it looks like. And then you can peel back each layer and go, okay, it's a great form of training. It's a great way to push your mind and your body. There's history to it. It's like peeling an onion apart. There's just so many layers to it. And there is a beautiful simplicity to it. Like as you advance in barbell sports, and I've done a lot of barbell sports. I've competed in powerlifting and strongman, and it's incredible. And I think that that's important for people's training too. I still do train that stuff. But if you look at how people train, they mess with percentages, and there's ways to measure the speed of your barbell. And then you throw some bands on there, or then you throw some hanging weights, and it's a good way to train. But when you lift the stone, it's just that simple. Like it's you versus that object. And my brother said something really, really neat. When you train with a barbell and you go for a max deadlift or a max squat or whatever it is, you take that apart and then you put it away. A stone, there's always a physical representation of that feat right there waiting for you. You don't have to load anything. You can go down, you can try lifting a stone, and it is there ready for you. You don't have to set the stage of anything. You don't need to wait for a platform. You just go and you do it. So that physical representation of strength is always there, and it's unchanging. So it's always you versus that. And then you can come back after a few months of training and working on something else, and that exact same identical test is right there, and you can see if you've bettered yourself enough to conquer it this time around.
Dude. Yeah, that's freaking awesome. That is freaking awesome. So my man, before I ask you the 2 final questions of the podcast that I ask all my guests, where can people find you? Where do people want to search for you?
So Instagram is probably the best. I just, for what I've found with the stone lifting community, is it's most people are on Instagram. So my personal page is Caveman Dave Man. It's just there's a story there, but I'm a simple guy who likes to lift rocks and break steel, so pretty caveman-y. So there's that. Our Edmonton Stones of Strength page is just that, Edmonton Stones of Strength, and that's where we advertise what we're doing, big lifts from our stones, new stones. And then my brother and I, as I'd mentioned a couple times, just started a stone lifting podcast. It's the Stones of Strength podcast. And we are very, very, very happy with the feedback we've been getting from people quite literally all around the world about this. So if this piques your interest at all, yeah, you can check that out if you want to learn more. We had just had episode 2. Episode 1 was just Dale and myself introducing ourselves and what our goals for the podcast were. And our episode number 2 that came out yesterday was a gentleman by the name of Ryan Stewart, and he's one of the most knowledgeable on the planet. And that really kind of is where the rubber hits the road for all this. He's a guy that researches and finds old stones and goes and rediscovers them for the first time in 300-400 years. So if any of you are interested, then check it out. It's because there's a lot to learn. We're gonna have a lot of really cool guests from around the world on that podcast.
That's freaking sweet, dude. So, yeah, this is gonna getting into the questions, gonna set the scene, gonna set the stage for you.
Okay.
It's at the end of your days. You've lifted all the stones that you've wanted to lift. And yeah, you're on your deathbed and you're surrounded by all the people that you care for. What is the piece of advice you want to pass on?
Damn. I mean, that's a really tough one. That is really deep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would hope that the people around me at that point know how important it is to love each other and how important family is. So I would assume that they know that, but I would honestly just say follow, and it's so cliche, man, but it's follow your passion and just like double down on it. I'm the kind of person that if I'm doing something, I'm going 110%. Like, look at me. I started lifting rocks and now I have a podcast and I'm planning on traveling the world to do it, right? About that. And the amount of positivity that it has brought me is huge. So if you find something you're passionate about, don't give a shit what anyone thinks and just go all in. Because and if it works out, sweet. If it doesn't, who cares, right? But I shouldn't say if it works out, sweet. If it doesn't work out, who cares? But if it does, you're in a really good place. Like, I've so much of my world right now is this stone lifting stuff, and I'm just really happy, and it's brought me closer to my kids, to my brother, to my friends, all of these things, right? So and my wife just tolerates it all, so that's good.
That's awesome. Oh
Yeah.
shit, we're talking about stones again. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
no, she's so patient with this because yeah, it's a weird side quest I'm on, but yeah, I don't know. It would have to be that. Just go for it, right? Whatever it is. If you want, like, just to touch on that real quick, like I'm a fireman and I wanted to get on the fire department, and to get on is super hard. And so is one of those things I had to set my sight, and that was my only goal, right? So I don't think I would have got on that job if I'd half-assed my application, my research, or pardon me, my preparation for that job. So I think a lot of life success come from, like, you got to go for it, right?
Absolutely. So the last question, this is a fun one. It's a little forecasting one as well. So the very best version, like what you would envision being the very best version of you, is sitting right next to you right now. What piece of advice is that Dave going to give you for this season of your life?
This season,
Yeah.
I would hope that he would give me the same thing for the answer the same question, man. Like, for this season in my life, like, I'm hoping to just keep pushing it and to travel again, to do more lifts, and to just really grow what I'm doing, because I'm happy where I'm at. So this season, I don't know, man. It's kind of a lame answer, but I would hope he would just give me the same advice that I would have given other people on my deathbed, is just keep going for it, man. Keep training, keep growing all of this stuff, and just keep having fun with it all, because that's what it's about too. Because if this stuff starts to not be fun, then you're not doing it right.
Dude, I freaking love that. You know what? I like that the two were connected. I think that was the first time that both answers were kind of connected, and I like that consistency. So it's like you're already living what your future freaking deathbed you would be experiencing. So I freaking love it.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To the best of our ability, I suppose.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
sweet. Well, folks, that is what I got for you today. So if you love today's episode, please do me a favor right now. Share it on your Instagram stories and tag me with my handle at DapperDudeKyle, along with two profiles here, at caveman.daveman and at Edmonton Stones of Strength. This is one of the ways that we grow. And while you're at it, be sure to go and check out the Stones of Strength podcast, where Dave is hosting, and you'll be able to learn some more knowledge bombs about stones. And outside of that, continue to be kind. And I hope your day treats you as good as you look.